Hello everyone. Today we're going to learn the use of insulation tester. After the rain stops, Miss Lulu found that her BAE car was unable to get on the high voltage, and the instrument reported an insulation system fault. As a service technician, what tools should you use to detect insulation faults? These two gauges are commonly used in our car servicing. Which one should you choose to measure insulation? The meter on the left is a digital multimeter. The meter on the right is an insulation tester, also known as a digital Megohmmeter. Next, we will learn how to use insulation tester. For insulation testing, insulation tester, as the name suggests, its main function is to measure insulation, to test insulating materials, insulation due to heat and moisture, aging and other causes of damage, and electrical insulation performance to meet the specified requirements. Motor and electrical insulation performance is good in relation to its normal operation and equipment safety. When the insulation of high-voltage circuits in new energy vehicles fails, high voltage and high current can affect passenger safety. Electricity generates heat, causing fires and burnout of modules or appliances. Why don't you use a multimeter resistor to measure insulation? Because the multimeter resistance measurement, the power supply voltage used is relatively low. The insulation resistance value presented at low voltage cannot reflect it. The true value of the insulation resistance at high voltage. The second is the working principle of the insulation tester. Let's first understand the working principle of insulation tester. Insulation resistance is defined between two electrodes of an insulating structure. The ratio of the value of the applied DC voltage to the value of the leakage current flowing through the pair of electrodes is R equals U divided by I, commonly used in megohms. This involves the generation of a DC voltage. Conventional megohmeters mainly have a hand generator, coupled with a rectified circuit that produces a high-voltage direct current. Digital is a megohmeter that uses a battery-powered, inbuilt DC and DC, high-voltage generator to generate high-voltage direct current. For reading of measured values, firstly, a conventional megohmeter indicates the converted insulation resistance value through the dial of the meter. Secondly, megohmeters use ADCs for conversion measurements and digital displays. Third, overview of insulation testers. Okay, now let's go through a video to understand the functions of the insulation tester. Here we take the Fluke 1508 insulation tester as an example to explain. This is the red probe of the Megohmmeter. Please note in particular that there is an inline remote button on the top, which has the same function as the test button on the meter. The tester can measure or test the following parameters: AC and DC voltages, earth coupling resistance, and insulation resistance. Let's look at the function of specific gears. V measures AC or DC voltage from 0.1 voltage to 600 voltage. Mega measures resistance from 0.01 mega to 20 and 00 kilomega. Measure insulation. Perform insulation tests with 1000 voltage. Measure insulation. Perform insulation tests with 500 voltages. Measure insulation. Perform insulation tests with 250 voltage. Measure insulation. Perform insulation tests with 100 voltage. measure insulation, perform insulation tests with 50 voltage. Fourth, the use of insulation testers. We learn about insulation resistance measurements in the form of an animation. We use insulation testers. For insulation resistance measurements, put on protective gear and plug the test probe into V and COM. Common input terminals. Firstly, 0, the test. Turn the rotary switch to 50 voltage. Make short circuit on the two probes and press the test button to start the test. Press the test button on the meter, which has the same effect as the wire remote button on the red probe. After releasing the test button, the resistance reading shown in the main display is the short circuit resistance. From the short circuit resistance is 0. To determine whether the instrument is normal or not, we now test the insulation of insulating mats. Wear protective gear. Insert the test probe into the appropriate hole and rotate the rotary switch to 1000 voltage. Generally, a test voltage greater than the rated voltage of the circuit under test is required. Press and hold the test button to start the test. After releasing, the test button reads 11 ohms, indicating that the insulating mat is in good insulating condition. Now we measure the insulation of the high voltage wiring harness of the battery pack training platform to ground. Firstly, wear high voltage protective gear and de-energize the pack platform. Insulation tests can only be carried out without power. Disconnect the high voltage harness plug from the meter box to the distribution box, with the red probe touching the core and the black probe touching the reliable grounding point, and rotate the rotary switch to 1000 V. Generally, a test voltage greater than the rated voltage of the circuit under test is required. Press and hold the test button to start the test. After releasing the test button, the reading is compared with the standard value to determine whether the insulation meets the requirements. In the same way, we can measure the motor winding to case bonding. The Fluke 1508 insulation tester also has a voltage measurement function. Two probes are inserted into the COM and V holes. Select the voltage gear. The red probe is connected to the positive terminal of the battery. The black probe is connected to the negative terminal of the battery, and the reading is the voltage of the battery. Okay, now let's talk about the precautions for the use of insulation testers. First of all, insulation and resistance tests can only be carried out on unenergized circuits. Secondly, in insulation testing, the test voltage selected must be greater than the rated operating voltage of the circuit to be tested. Third, when the measured value exceeds the maximum display range, the tester displays the symbol. When it shows that the battery is too low, it is necessary to carry out a battery replacement and remove the rear end cover in the order shown on the diagram in turn. Let's conclude with a review of what we've talked about today. In this lesson, we have talked about, firstly, the principle of insulation test. Secondly, the use of insulation tester through the case study. And finally, the precautions for the use of insulation tester. Skilled use of measuring tools is an essential skill for our automotive repair. Have you got anything about the use of insulation testers?